the largest permanent food stamp increase in U.S. history. So in the last week or two, Joe Biden's administration announced that they're increasing the food stamp program by at least 25% in the not too distant future. I believe it starts in October. Now the question is this to prevent an Arab Spring here in the US? Or is this to offset the real inflation rate, which is showing worse and worse stagflation that the Consumer Price Index or Changing Propaganda Index, or CPI, as I've been calling it the last couple weeks, is having a problem hiding the real inflation rate. So for those of you not familiar, food prices in July were up 31% from the same month last year, according to an index compiled by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. This is in stark contrast to the Changing Propaganda Index and what the deflationistas are telling us. So increasing food stamps or EBT cards by 25% or more per month permanently will help offset that for a lot of American families. There is at least 45 million people here on food stamps and EBT cards here in the United States. The number's probably higher. That's the last number I saw. Now, the US can get away with giving out this much more simply because they have the world's reserve currency and can just create currency units out of thin air. If another country were to try this, it could drastically hurt their exchange rate on the foreign currency exchange rate markets. But the dollar has actually been rallying. So the more spending programs Congress has announced lately, the more the dollar index has been rallying because other countries are also printing. It is a race to debase. But if another country, let's say an emerging market country, tried to do something like this, tried to increase benefits by 25-30%, they could risk a currency crisis rapidly in a very short amount of time compared to the US. This is part of the exorbitant privilege that the US has, for now at least, still with the world's reserve currency. But I think with the food prices increasing this much, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization Index, 31% big increase, we are going to have a lot more Arab Springs. Similar to 2011, it's not just going to be one or two countries like in the past. It's going to be a lot more countries if this continues. But comment below if you think that this is a way for the US federal government to kind of tacitly admit that the real inflation rate is much, much higher than the Changing Propaganda Index by giving out a lot more in food stamps and EBT cards. 25% boost. This is the largest single increase in the program's history, according to multiple reports. Finally, if you like content like this and want to help keep content like this free so it doesn't all end up behind a paywall, or you want far more in-depth content, research, financial education, and analysis than I provide in these short little free videos, there is now 26 articles in the last 11 weeks exclusively for patrons for only $5 a month, the cost of a Starbucks cup of coffee. And there is over 180 articles, charts, and audio podcasts exclusive for patrons behind the paywall on a lot of interesting topics about commodity industries, global macro, companies and sectors, a lot of articles on gold mining, silver mining, precious metal royalty and streaming companies. Lately, we've been looking for dividend increase companies in the precious metal sector because despite precious metal prices being stuck in a trading range, the gold industry is the only industry across the board increasing dividends without loading massive amounts of debt onto the balance sheet. This is the healthiest gold mining stocks have been in decades or arguably ever. So if you want to read more about that, there are a lot of new articles out in just the last couple weeks, 26 new articles out in the last 11 weeks. There is a lot of in-depth content there behind the paywall, all for only $5 a month. No one charges less than me in this space for premium content. If you don't like it, you can always cancel, although I think you're really going to like it. So if I could wrap up this short little video very quickly, I think there is tacit admissions here from politicians and bureaucrats that the real inflation rate is way, way larger than the Changing Propaganda Index is claiming. You do not increase food stamps and EBT card payouts for food by 25% permanently if you're not worried about an Arab Spring or an inflation problem or a stagflation problem or food shortages or other problems that are coming in the years to come. So this is a tacit admission where the people in power here in DC, the economic and political elites, the politicians and bureaucrats here in DC, without publicly admitting that inflation is a problem by increasing food stamps and EBT cards by 25% or more per month. This is admitting that there actually is a problem without giving speeches saying that there is a problem. And that stagflation, the cost of goods sold, wage increases, rent increases, will get worse in the coming months. Now, what worries me also is that other countries can't do this. They can't just arbitrarily increase food payments to poor people by 25%. They can't just print the money and give it like the US can. Otherwise, those other countries could have a currency crisis. So there is going to be other countries having enormous civil unrest in the not too distant future, similar to the Arab Spring in 2011, because of higher food prices and shrinkflation.